welcome to 28 Days and Beyond,
where we talk about our history, our heritage, and our culture.
I'm Amari.
I'm Charisma. Welcome back.
Charisma, hello.
Amari, hello.
What's going on?
Bonjour.
Let me ask you a personal question.
Uh-oh.
What your finances talking about?
Sir.
Yo.
That is officially now the timeout chair.
Okay. Let me ask you, when you were growing up, what kind of education did you have around money and finances and so forth?
Well, I feel like I was really fortunate because you
were balling out of control.
Well, no, my grandparents actually, for as long as I can remember, they had real estate.
Oh, okay.
So,
nice.
They had rental properties. So there were always conversations, about what needed to be done for those properties. I remember as a kid, my brother and I would go with my grandfather and my grandmother to those properties.
To collect rent?
No, not to collect rent at all. Actually, they were showing us, different things, how to fix certain things, like soldering and all that kind of stuff. And I have fond memories of them at the dining room table or the kitchen table where they were talking about bills and like what was being spent. So I have those memories, and then they passed, a lot of those real estate properties down to my mom.
Yeah.
So we talked about it a little bit, not as much as I would like to now that I'm older, having friends that are more, financially wise, I will say.
So would you say once you got into the world, you were prepared for, managing finances?
To a certain degree, but
Nice.
I feel like things are constantly changing.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of things that I feel like I didn't know in terms of, investing certain things or stocks or, Wall Street. That's just not.
That's a whole different
Yeah,
language.
it's like
when they be on it, what does that even mean? How do you, anyway, yeah, certainly so.
So that's, that's something that I had to, do research, and I'm still doing research and leaning a lot on friends and family members that are more equipped or know a lot more about it. What about you?
No, no, I was not prepared, in the sense that, like, I remember coming out of college, I got a scholarship and I had an abundance of money all of a sudden, first time in my life. Yo, when I look back, where did that money go? I did not know anything about like saving. Yeah. And my dad was like, you got to put some money away. I'm like, all right, yeah, I'll do that. And then, but now, as the bills continue to increase, I'm like, yo, this is crazy.
Yeah.
And it really makes me think. So everyone always says you got to read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, right?
Which I have read.
I mean, I've read it, but there's only one thing that I really remember from it.
What's that?
I remember thinking there's a whole bunch of rules that we don't know anything about. You know what I'm saying? So, and I mean, like, wealthy people use taxes and tax shelters and all of that to maintain their wealth. You feel me? We don't know anything about that. It's like, all right, go to TurboTax or H&R Block, give them our, get our little refund and then keep it moving. But there's so much more to it.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
A lot more.
And I mean, particularly in terms of like, it's more than saving. You mentioned investing, the importance of investing, but really building wealth, not getting rich, but building wealth that will last across generations.
Yeah, generationally. I have a good friend, her name is Valerie Trent. In the past few years, she's really been helping me put certain things in order, even as far as properties, like learning what properties to put in trust and like those different things that I, prior to talking to her.
Sounds like a foreign language, but yeah.
What does that even mean?
Exactly.
So I think you're in a good place if you're at the place where you're saying, okay, these are the things that I don't know. Let me try to
Word up.
reach out to some folks and figure this whole thing out.
Well, speaking of which, we're reaching out to someone.
Yes,
that would be Kai Cunningham, who's going to join us to talk about finances and more when we come back on 28 Days and Beyond.
Welcome back to 28 Days and Beyond. We are now joined by our guest, Kai Cunningham. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yep, so born and raised in Baltimore, Maryland, graduated from Villanova University in 2016, majored in finance, worked on Wall Street at Goldman Sachs, started in New York in sales and trading, and then recently moved to Los Angeles, got an offer to work in the private wealth division.
Wow.
Nice. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm bi-coastal. So, we've been talking about financial literacy and education, particularly within the Black community. What are some things that you've seen that we just don't know and we should know?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is just understanding like the power that we have in ourselves to teach ourselves. So I got started because I realized how how bad at sports I was. I mean, I wasn't bad, but I realized that I wasn't going to be a professional athlete. So I decided to like focus on other things. I actually got into a program at Wharton called the Wharton Sports Business Initiative. So it was still a combination. It was a combination of sports, but something else competitive. In combination with it. So I learned about, what goes into ticket sales. How do they think about evaluating a team? How are the players marketed? Things like that. So that gave me insight into, another competitive industry that was still, combined with something that I was interested in. And from there, I started to learn and read about, things about finance in terms of like investing in myself, reading, learning about the stock market, how that relates to everything. So that's kind of how I got started off. But I would say one thing that that we don't focus on as much is just like knowledge exchange and sharing. I don't know if you guys seen, I mentioned this in the panel earlier, have you guys seen Black Panther? Wakanda Forever. So like there's a scene at the end where he talks to his sister and he says, I want you to lead the knowledge exchange. And then like Oakland, I believe. And I think like that was one of the most powerful messages in the film to me, is because like a lot of times as Black people, we don't pass things down. And I think knowledge is one of the most important things and one of the most powerful things that we have. So to the extent that we can continue to, pass things down or make an effort to do it more often, I think that's something that we tend to forget.
What are some of the things that you feel like if you're starting out basic, or if you're starting at the basic level, I should say, and you don't really know anything about finances or investing, what's some of the first things that you would tell someone that they need to do, like from the very beginning? Yeah,
so from the very beginning, the most important thing is just to keep a long-term perspective. So like a lot of times, so I help athletes and entertainers invest their money. And one of the first things they say is, I just want you to double my money. And I'm like, if it were that easy, literally everyone would do it. So the first thing is just keeping a long-term perspective. It's a long-term game. So I tell people, invest in the stock market as a whole, as an aggregate. So there's a vehicle that you can buy called an ETF. It's an exchange-traded fund. So instead of buying Apple, Amazon, Google, Microsoft individually, you buy one vehicle that gives you exposure to all of those companies. And what I do is literally every time I get paid, I just buy 2 or 3 ETFs and I just let it sit. Because it's a long-term game.
Long-term like what though?
So like over the past 100 years, the stock market, the S&P 500 has returned 11.5%. So that's buying that same vehicle, you'll return 11.5% over the long
Over 100 years.
Over 100 years,
So,
exactly.
but that's actually, so part of what long-term means is, right, a lot of us think individually, but we know that if all Black people of one generation were to die today, they would give their children debt. Right. Exactly. So now we're talking about intergenerational wealth. So when we're talking long term, we're not just talking about so that when I'm 65, I could be on a yacht. We're talking about so that my grandchildren. Right. All right. Got you.
Exactly. And then the second thing I would point to is just, I'm glad you brought up debt, is just to eliminate your debt as quickly as possible. A lot of times, like, I know when I first got a credit card, I was like, I can buy whatever I want now, and then never ended up paying it off. but that interest, it accumulates over time, and you're creating more and more of a burden for yourself, not only for the present, but for the future, because now it's affecting your credit. So when you go to get a house, you're going to run into problems. When you go to purchase other things that you may not have the cash or the immediate capital to front right away, like you're going to run into a problem when you need that credit and credibility, when you need that down the line. So that's another thing that I would point to.
Wow. Well, we're just getting started, but we have to take a bit of a break. But we want to keep this conversation going when we get back. We'll be right back with more at 28 Days and Beyond.
We're back on 28 Days and Beyond with Kai Cunningham.
Yes, we are. So you mentioned a little bit before the break, eliminating debt. How do you go about doing that
when them bills be so high?
And I find, at least for me, it's a cycle. And before you know it, you get your paycheck. By the time all your bills are done, and just life expenses, food, electric, gas, whatever the case may be, you don't have a lot of money left over. And so many people find themselves in that cycle of not really having a lot of discretionary money by the time all their adult responsibilities are done. So how do we go about getting out of debt when that's the case?
Right. I think it's one thing is a mindset, right? So like just cutting back on certain things that you may not need and focusing on
sorry, go ahead.
Focusing on the things that you actually need instead of your wants. So for example, making sure rent's paid first before you go buy a new pair of J's. Making sure.
But I gotta stay fly though. If I don't got a place to stay, at least I'm fly. No?
Nah, that's the wrong mindset. So like, making sure your responsibilities are taken care of before you go, go out to the club or whatever it is that you want to do.
Yeah.
And the second thing is just finding ways to kind of offset, the debt that you do have. So for example, a big misconception that we have, especially in the Black community, is that, we talk about saving, just put your money in the bank and just let it sit.
Yeah.
So there's a rule in finance called the rule of 72. It means it'll take $1 72 years to double with current interest rates and with current bank interest rates.
Chill.
So I challenge everyone, just look at your bank statements for wherever you do your checking, like pulling money out. Look at the interest rate that you have. It's probably 0.0001%. There are other vehicles that you can use in terms of saving that'll give you a much higher return. So for example, my company, Goldman Sachs, has this thing called GS Bank, and it gives you 1.5%. And even though that's small, it's still a lot higher than 0.001%.
Yeah.
So there's small things that you can do, whether it be, investing or putting your money in bonds, which is a safer investment, that'll yield you, 2 to 3% over the long term, or putting your money in like, a savings account with a higher interest rate that'll offset. And it's small, you might not notice it right away, but again, it's a long-term game.
Long-term, your goal should be to diversify your bonds.
Diversify your bonds.
But let me ask you this though. One of the things that we hear a lot, Robert Kiyosaki, I mentioned Rich Dad Poor Dad earlier. He says you have to pay yourself first. And I never really understood that concept. If I know that my bills are X amount per month and I'm only making such and such, then how can I pay myself first? What is that concept?
I think he's talking about a few different things, right?
Okay.
So it depends on your perspective. So for me, paying myself is investing. So like, obviously I'm going to take care of my bills, but for me, investing in the stock market is my way of paying myself because I know it's going to be worth more down the line. So therefore, those $200 pair of sneakers that I want now, actually in future value is probably discounted because I was able to earn interest on the investment that I made today. So in reality, I might have actually only paid $150 if I made $50 from the investment that I made today.
I like how you did that.
What's your stance on student loans?
Oh gosh. Yeah. How long do we have?
Yeah.
Student loans are tough. They're definitely tough.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of people forget about the fact that you can actually get scholarships while you're already in school. So like applying online, reaching out to mentors and people in your network. There's so many different programs of people who, give aid or financial help to students that are already students. A lot of times, I know, for example, for myself, I thought, once I got into college, that was it. But like once you get into college, there's still opportunities. And even when you're out of college, it's still applying those same principles over the long term to try to offset the debt that you do have.
That's interesting. I mean, because I've tried, a few different approaches in different directions on how to reduce debt. One of the things that I've been doing successfully is like the snowball method. So once I pay off this, instead, let's say it was a credit card bill of $150. Once I pay that off, I don't have $150 extra in my pocket. I just apply that to the next highest interest rate loan. Exactly. So, like, what are some other ways, though? I mean, because this debt, this is getting us, man.
That's rough.
Yeah, that is definitely something that's affecting the community for sure. I don't want to keep repeating myself, but I really think that just going back to the theme of keeping a long-term perspective and start chipping away. One thing that some of my friends do actually is when they get their taxes, they'll start to pay off their debt. I know a lot of times when people get their taxes, they want to splurge a little bit.
Vacation.
You deserve it, okay? You deserve it.
You've been working hard.
Yeah.
But paying off your debt as quickly as possible whenever you do get, maybe a bonus from work or you get your little side hustle, whatever it is. Try to use that to chip away at the current debt that you have, because the quicker you pay it off, the better. Like chipping at it a little by little is only creating something that's going to last into the longer term. But when you do have like larger income streams coming in, like for example a bonus or something like that, like it's better to try to draw the principal down as much as you can, as opposed to just paying little by little by little. It's like it's like a dog chasing its tail.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing that wealth of knowledge.
So I see what you did there. I see what you did.
Kai, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
We'll be back with more 28 Days and Beyond right after this.
And we're back on 28 Days and Beyond.
Yes, we are.
That's what's up.
Did you learn a lot, Amari?
Oh no, I certainly did. I mean, this is really something that, like we were saying, as I get older, do this whole adulting thing, I'm really trying to get a grasp of it.
Yeah, adulting 101, I think is getting getting a handle on your finances. Because, I mean, it can spin out of control pretty quickly, when you think about it. And one of the reasons I asked about student loans in particular was because, you know, that was one of the things, like, as soon as you graduate,
they're like, hey, yo.
It's like, hi.
What's up?
We are here. And it is aggressive. And then, you know, a lot of times, too, you know, if you can't find work right away or whatever, you find yourself in default, and then you find yourself owing more money than you did initially. Because of, you know.
So for a period of time, there was discussion about, you know, more creative ways of sort of reducing that debt, but those discussions seem to have ceased. They seem to have ceased.
They have flown away.
But you know, but one of the things again, for me, that I'm really trying to learn. I mean, because it's amazing how with a little bit of intention and consistency, these things add up. So like there are some apps that will, let's say you buy something at the store and it costs, you know, $15, $20, it'll take 80 cents and put it in your savings account. You know what I'm saying? Just to start building, because obviously like when things are automated, they happen, you know, a lot easier than it's, oh, remember I got to put 80 cents in there. You know what I'm saying? So little things like that, I mean, it really does make a big difference.
I still have my huge like water jug though.
Yep.
Like that's been my method since I was a kid.
But when it's time to cash it in though, how you gonna move that thing?
Just count those coins.
Oh, you what? Count them yourself? You know they got machines now.
Yeah, and they charge you to count your money.
It's true. It's true.
I'm gonna make it hell, all on my own.
Got you. Hell. Folks, she said hell.
I did.
So what? So long term now, he told us to think in terms of long term. What is your long term vision for your financial success? See how I hit you with that?
My long term vision is to get in contact with Kai.
Got you.
Have a discussion.
Got you. One of the things I think was really important though is thinking about, you know, 2 or 3 generations down the line.
Really
There's a
important.
documentary. I'll try and keep this brief. There's a documentary by the grandson of Johnson & Johnson or something like that.
Okay.
And he talks about this meeting that all these wealthy families have. In order to get into the meeting, you have to have had 5 generations of wealth.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
And in that meeting, they all read this book and they discuss ways to have 5 more generations of wealth. So that takes a high level of intentionality, a high level of planning, and a high level of purpose. For us, though, it's very difficult. The questions you were asking, when you got, you know,
how do you do it?
How you make $1 out of 15 cents, a dime and a nickel, you know what I mean?
And not just for athletes, just, you know, for everyday people, because, you know, athletes get thrown into it, you know, from having like no money to having all this money and then trying to figure out what to do with it. But even if you're working with, you know, just the average salary, it's difficult to figure out how to manage that and to still be able to live and flourish. But seriously, long term, I hope to be able to pass something down, you know, to the generations after me, to my children and my grandchildren. And I'm really grateful for my grandparents and my parents for at least getting me started on that path. So I hope that, you know, I can continue to have conversations like the one we had today with Kai and, you know, just continue learning so that I can figure out ways to do that.
Well, when you figure it out, let me know. This has been another episode of 28 Days and Beyond,
where we talk about our history, our heritage, and our culture. We'll see you next time.